okay, last few days in Israel. We're gonna start with the external things that everyone have been talking about in the past few days, and we will continue to internal things. So obviously there have been all the things from Lebanon, and the RGC, and once in a while the Houthis chime in. And then there have been the amount of threats from every side. Now we know for a fact Hizballah never really kept any of the agreements. Not that we agreed on anything with Hezbollah, not that Hezbollah agreed to anything, but either way, ceasefire was not existed. It was the Middle Eastern ceasefire. Now, I've seen a lot of people talking about how they are very confused about the types of attacks that have been happening in the past few days, and how it seems to just constantly escalating and then de-escalating and escalating and de-escalating. What is happening right now is a show of power. So the people who are not aware, the Middle East has a very special mentality. It's the strongest survives. It's very much of a very much of a Wild West thing. You've got to show power. If you don't show power, the Middle East will eat you up. That has been the mentality for centuries. The problem with that is, in the modern world that we are, and with the intervention of the US, it leads to a very unique situation where you don't want to respond or attack too much to start a war, but you have to do something to show force. And you will yell and you will shout, but you have to have at least a symbolic action. And the thing is that based on that type of action, that can either make you look weaker or make you look stronger. Now, there are multiple points in that whole show of power that we've seen, both a show of power that are actually working for the benefit of the attacker, and ones that actually make it worse for the attacker. Like, so one of the things is on Wednesday, when there were the few attacks from Iran to Israel, that was their show of power. That was an effective one, but what they said afterward was not. Because what they said afterwards is that if you attack Lebanon, if you attack any part of Lebanon, now they claim they meant to Beirut, but they said if you attack Lebanon, then we're gonna hit you even harder. Obviously, operations still remained because Hezbollah kept attacking, but at the same time, Iran couldn't send. They knew they shouldn't send more missiles because that will be too much of an escalation. So it's a balancing thing. So you had a good thing for Iran, which is the early show of power, the missiles, and then you have what made it worse, which was the empty threat about Lebanon. Now, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, he is the king of threats, empty and not empty. Now, it doesn't really matter what happens in the background right now. There's probably things happening in the background that we don't know about. And there is no point of like trying to speculate because none of us know. We can only assume and think based on what we've seen, based on patterns. But the whole point is that the whole point in those strategies is you don't want to have a pattern, because you want to confuse your enemy as much as possible. Now, this entire time, even when it wasn't reported, you had multiple attacks by the US, mainly in the Straits of Hormuz, and Iran and US been doing all those kind of one sends a bit, the other sends a bit. There was something little. And now I want to take you to the response of the US and to the response of Israel after Wednesday. The response of Israel after Wednesday was not the right course of action. Because the response that we did kind of what shown the symbolic show of power, but not enough. I'd say that we should have had at least more launch site. We had to have at least one meaningful site to be hit, and it would still be in the course of show of power, which it's like a vague thing that kind of everyone agree on. It's a certain line that you kind of know when to stop, come and don't. The way I see it personally, I don't think we even got close to that line. Uh, but but yeah, but that's one of those things. This is why we've been seeing all those like um shows of force, all those uh little uh little barrage of attacks. And obviously, beyond what was on Wednesday, every time there's been all kinds of small attacks. Now we're gonna move a bit. So that's the explanation of what's been happening the past few days, and this is why it looks so confusing. It's actually, and it's also, by the way, incredibly exhausting for Israeli people and in general Middle Eastern people. Uh, in the recent few days, mainly Kuwait, I've seen that there's more attacks that are being sent to Kuwait. Um, but yeah, that is in the wider spectrum of the Middle East. Now let's focus real quick on Lebanon. So Lebanon and Hezbollah, it is in front of Israel. Uh, it's not exactly the same show of force. What's been happening is that Iran has fully taken responsibility over Lebanon, but also kinda not. So what's happening is we have a lot of pressure from both the American side and from the Iranian side not going to attack, especially in Beirut. What's actively happening is that on daily basis, Hezbollah is sending a lot of missiles to the north of Israel, um, and in Israel, the response are very defensive response. What does that mean? That means you only attack maybe launchers. You don't push further. We had a point of time about a week ago where we kept pushing inside, but now we even drew some of the forces back, and then others we push in. It's very confusing what's happening. When I'm talking with soldiers from the north, a lot of them talk about uncertainty, about operations that were canceled on the last moment. So it's a very confusing situation for Israeli people, and especially the poor people in the north of Israel. At the same time, we see a unique thing coming from both our government and our military. So, the spokesperson of the military, which is a new spokesperson, has lately been announcing a lot of times that a lot of the missiles and a lot of the drones and a lot of the katyushot that are being sent are actually sent to our forces in South Lebanon and not to the northern cities. But that is factually not true. In fact, a lot of the statements of our spokesperson and our government officials about what's happening or what's not happening in the north, or what's happening and not happening inside of Lebanon, have been false. There have been blatant lies and cover-ups, and that's things that, since it's a small country and since half of the country is in the freaking military, then it's very it's very noticeable. You can't hide that type. There are a lot of things that you can hide from the people, even in countries like Israel, but this is not one of them. If it was South Lebanon, and then maybe there will be like on Kiryat Shmona, like the cities that are straight on the borders. We're talking about ones that get to Tzfat. We're talking about uh ones that get to the upper part of Israel, to North Israel, but not the line. So this is clearly targeted at Israeli cities, and not just forces in South Lebanon. That again, we also see this whole complicated thing of some regions we go away from, some regions we go even deeper. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that leads to a lot of pressure from inside Israeli society, that we see that we're being lied to, and a lot of Israelis are starting to call the government a puppet of the US. In fact, it's been a long time that not just the people that hate Bibi just because they hate Bibi say that he's the puppet of Trump. It's now becoming a relatively mainstream opinion that we are so dependent on the US approval, uh, that we are just that we're basically the puppet. Now, some of it can be criticism of Bibi or the government. Some of it is not, right. Some of it is just a reality that we understand, that right now we do not hold the manufacturing power, and it's something that we're working for, and we do need to keep a certain balance. And then you have the people that say maybe that's part of the strategy, that maybe we're getting ready for something bigger. Maybe all the friction that we see between the US and Israel is a show. But like I said, those are fine details that we cannot even get into, that there's no point of getting into, because it's such an internal secretive thing that just like we wouldn't know. And that's kind of the purpose, for no one to know. Now let's go away from Lebanon, and we'll go inside of Israel. So we already started talking about a bit with how the relations between the citizens and the government, uh, the split between the right and left is very large. There have been all kinds of incidents that have been concerning. Uh, so I'm gonna try to show the good and bad in the recent days. Now, keep in mind, all of what I said right now is my opinion, and though it's my opinion as an Israeli, obviously I do not represent the entire Israeli community. I try to be as reasonable as possible. I try to see both sides, but I'm gonna be biased because this is how humans are, and in the end, like, I am shaped by my own experience as well. So, a long time thing that has been one of the biggest arguments in the country since the 50s has been the idea of who needs to be part of the mandatory law of recruitment, like the mandatory service law, that you've got to be in the military, or in certain cases, do a national service, which is a kind of voluntary in certain places. This is what I did. Like, have my own problems, and I requested formally to do a national service. So instead of going to the Air Force as I was supposed to go to, I went um, to a hospital and helped kids with disabilities for about a year. That was my service. Um, so even though there is a mandatory service law, the problem is it's only partially mandatory, because it's not equal. It's not mandatory for everyone, because it's not mandatory for our citizens, and a part of it, the part of it is that actually makes sense. A lot of because we have a lot of our citizens that have Arab relatives in the countries that have been fighting us for the past 78 years. And we don't want to force them to put them in this position. You have all kinds of political, and lately you also have a lot of, oh, we don't trust them, which is another thing, the internal conflict of the identity of the country, of the democratic Israel versus the Jewish Israel, with democratic and liberal views. Um, and because of that, they have been exempt. Most of the time, when we talk about the arguments and the conflict, even though the Arab society is being talked about, it's usually there's a kind of a wide agreement that we don't want them in the military, from either from what I said, the ethical point, or either because people don't trust them. But at the same time, a lot of people would argue that they need to do at least national service, like all of us do, like people like me do. The deeper problem, the deeper core, the core of the conversation, and it has been the core of the conversation, like I said, since the 50s, is about religious, but mainly Hasidic Jews. Hasidic Jews, as it's current, are they have been exempt by law from serving in the military for a long time. The recruitment, the law that exempts them needs to be renewed every few years, and in the past year they needed to renew it, but been all kinds of issues about, especially the more liberal the country becomes, the more people are not religious. Keep in mind, 40% of Jews in Israel, they define themselves as not religious. Now, because of that, we have seen a surge of movements that demand that Hasidic Jews will be recruited to the military. And in some points, in some cases, arrests have been made, because if you break the mandatory law, which now they have to oblige to, as long as they don't renew the law that lets them get out of the military, you can get arrested for not showing up. And then again, some argue, but a lot of us Jews, they volunteer in this and they volunteer in that. So do we need to feel? Okay, then let them have national service. But because we came to a point that many young, capable men in a military, and it's the reason it's been getting worse. The reason it's been getting more and more heated is that now, after almost 3 years of combat, families are exhausted, people lost their businesses, people in the reserves haven't seen their children for 2 years. People are exhausted, and it's getting to the point that people that were exempt because of head trauma, of PTSD, of all kinds of mental things, are forced back into the military because we just don't have enough. At least it's certain regiments that we have plenty. So this whole idea is like, sure, we don't expect now to immediately recruit them and then have them ready in a month to go to the field, but something needs to change, especially when we see the demographic and we see that the birth rates for the more liberal or not religious people keep dropping, and is about and it has been dropping for a long time. and seeing a lot of the Hasidic Jews keep having tons and tons of babies. Now, there are a lot of problems in general in our society when it comes to Hasidic Jews. It's because again, it's the point of contagious of how about how we see Israel. Is Israel a Jewish democratic country, or is it a democratic Jewish country? And there's a difference between that, because this is because the way we organize the word shows what's the priority. Now, for maybe for some of you, it can be easy to say, that's easy, Jewish democratic country, or the thing is, it's a conflict because of the split that we have right now. Because October 7th also made a lot of changes in the Israeli society. And one of them is the way we view religion. Some people turn to religion to see as their savior. Some people abandoned religion because they felt betrayed. Some people it only strengthened what they already thought. Some people, very extreme people, have started to blame not religious Jews at the Nova Party that were dancing around the Buddha statue that we see a lot of in a lot of nature parties and throughout the world, and they blamed them for October 7th. Let that sink in for a minute. Um, very very extreme part. Don't get me wrong, right? That's not all religious Jews, not even all Hasidic Jews. But because of that, and because we actually starting to kind of very little enforce that law, there have been mass protests of extreme Hasidic Jews. Extreme Hasidic Jews, they usually were talking about the Jerusalem sector. We call it the Peleg Yerushalmi. And they will usually block roads, will climb on buses and cars, and will curse women or spit on them, or and they will shout with all their chests, "We will die before we go to the military." And it has been going on for a while now, but there was a huge escalation in the past week. Last week and yesterday, even, like, I'm recording this on Friday, the 12th of June. So yesterday on Thursday, there was probably one of the biggest one, to the point that on Wednesday night they sent an emergency eviction notice to all the people in the middle of the country of either don't get out of the houses, or get out of the middle of the country, because we're gonna own all those roads. No one is gonna be able to move. And people that were in emergencies, people that needed to be in places, couldn't move. This is the second time it's happening this week. I had to go. I had to basically tell my lecturers yesterday, I am sorry, I cannot stay for the classes. I'm afraid that I'll get stuck because I'm dependent on buses, and they all already that's a whole other thing. But because of that, I was stuck, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to be stuck in the road on the road for hours. So I just bailed out of multiple classes so I can get home before everything goes to shit. And oh my god, good thing that I did it, because people later they decided to stay anyway and had to and they left the university at 7:30 uh at evening. A lot of them didn't arrive until 11, 12, like 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. There's been a lot of violence in the road. That's also something that we've been seeing more and more. A lot of another point that we see a lot is a huge rise of violence in the streets, and not just between religious people and not religious people, not just between religious people from one sector and religious people from another sector, but also teenagers and kids and teachers that are suddenly sent to hospitals because their students beat them. We are seeing a rise of racism as well. We see all those things, and it's terrifying as an Israeli to see all of this. And why am I talking about all this? Is because a lot of this is also because of the war. People have been on edge for 3 years. Students have not been able to learn to study for 6 years because of the COVID as well. People are exhausted, people are tired, and people are angry. And that is terrifying to see. And that is something that I wanted to talk about for a long time because that, especially now when the elections are closer than ever, this is one of the things we just see it being worse at everything. We also have a few people. We have people in the media and people in the government that, well, they get money from it. They get money from all the chaos, so they make it worse. So if you are very leftist, maybe in your news you will see it be talk only about Hasidic Jews and about all Hasidic Jews being that way, even though it's a minority. Because this is the good part. Some Hasidic Jews, by the way, have been recruiting to the military, have been choosing to go to the military on their own accords. It has been on the rise. It's still very much a minority that do it. If I remember correctly, about last year, the data was about 8 to 10%, but it's the highest it has been ever since that law first came out. And those things are incredibly important. We also now have the Pride Parade. And just to lighten a bit the mood, I would like to show you what kind of things we show the Pride Parade. For the people who don't know, the Pride Parade in Israel, the biggest one in Asia, period. And to people who also don't know, yeah, Israel, the Middle East is in Asia. That's apparently a lot of. That's apparently a thing that I needed to clarify multiple times. Now, I want to show a bit some good things because we talked about a lot of negatives here. Israel is a complicated society. So even with all the violence, all the hate and diversity, and there's still an unbroken, unbroken chain of unity that I do not know how to explain exactly. It's hard to explain it if you're not Israeli. Um, And obviously, when it comes to the Iranian people, at this point, it is widely known in Israel about the Iranian people. If once it wasn't, most people weren't really educated on that subject. Now it's clearer than ever that Iranians need our help and that Iranians deserve it more than deserve it. Um, Now today we had the Pride Parade in Tel Aviv. This is the first Pride Parade we had, the first official big Pride Parade we had since October 7th. So it has been meaningful. And I think one of the funniest things was to see this. Let me show this. And and much tobacco uh, coming specifically for the Pride Parade to celebrate with us. That wasn't the only cotton cut, by the way. We had multiple of those. We had multiple hundreds of thousands of people in a lot of those cotton boards, but this one was definitely the biggest one that someone made. Um, for the next year in Tehran, basically, you know, you cannot say Israelis don't have humor. Humor is one of our um of our most interesting points, specifically dark humor. And there were multiple things. I'd say that memes are the one thing that thrives more than anything in Israel. Every time there's a war, every time there is something, and that's something that we can unite on. If the Shia and the Sunni unite on hating Israel or hating Jews, we unite over calling the Ayatollah gay. Uh, but yes. So that's one thing. Another thing is generally this entire time, donations, volunteering, all those kinds of things in Israel have still been increasing. Now, keep in mind, the Israeli society has been has known it's known that people help each other in time of need. Every time someone needed money, or like a lot of time, a mass campaign will open, and by the first 2 hours, we would surpass the goal. Israelis are very passionate. We're passionate about the country, and I think an amazing trait that we have is that even with all of that, even with Hezbollah, even with the Houthis, even with the Ayatollahs, most most Israelis still see the people behind. Most Israelis still see the people in Lebanon that don't want any of this. They still call to help and protect the Iranians. They they still don't give a fuck about Yemen. Okay. Israeli law real quick. I'm a Yemeni Jew, right? Now I didn't come from Yemen. It was my grandparents that came from Yemen. There we have inner stereotypes for Jews. Oh my god. Yemeni Jews have become a meme, and because of that the Houthis have become a meme. One of the stereotypes about Yemeni Jews is that basically we're cheap people. We don't spend money. We hoard money. Uh, And it's a very funny thing because the Houthis, a lot of the strategies was sending one missile at a time. So the Houthis became a joke very quickly. But even with that, the Yemen, we like most people don't really care about the Yemeni people. Like it's not that we don't care, but it also like we don't have anything against them. We are aware that's the Houthis. We are aware that's Hizballah. We are aware that's the PA. It's Hamas. We are aware all those things, and I think that's an incredible thing that even with all of what's happening and how what's been happening for 78 years, we still see humans on the other side. Now, that has been challenged a lot, especially with Palestinians, because of October 7th. And even with that, we usually don't hear about, ah, Palestinians are animals, even though there are key figures in our government that love to say that. We hear mostly about how they are educated to hate from birth. It's a realistic take, and it's unfortunately a take that we see in every survey done by outside or inside sources uh, in Gaza and in the Palestinian areas. That's probably the most complicated um, field, but I think if you ever seen the Ask Project, uh, a channel made by the name of Corey, made by a person named Corey, which is a Canadian Jew that I think he came to Israel around the Second Intifada. Um, when you ask soldiers, because he did make multiple videos when he asked soldiers, his whole thing is that he asks questions that his followers send him. And he has Israelis and he has Palestinians and he has certain sectors of Christian Palestinians or Arab Israeli, Hasidic Israelis, and he tries to ask as many people from as many spread areas as possible to get a general opinion. And I think the most interesting thing is that even in the videos of after October 7th, a lot of people, a vast majority, still say they don't hate them in Israel. Like a lot of, and I think that is something that's very unique. And that's like the biggest positive thing that I can say about my country, that we have a battle for the identity of the country. A lot of time we feel, or at least I feel, like we are losing the core of Israeli identity. But at the same time, there there are some values that are still there, and they are so strong that even people who lost the entire family on October 7th stayed with those opinions. And I think that's something very unique to Israel. A lot of the rage that we have in Israel comes from what the media here shows. The media here shows uh, that the world hates us, that everyone hates us. There's no place that people like us, that Europe has completely fallen to the Muslims. And it's not true. We have neighborhoods, we have the main cities, and specifically places like Britain and France. But the people are waking up there, and I think we're gonna see a shift. I think we're about to see a big shift in Europe, and I don't know how long it'll be until we finish what we finish in Iran, in the Middle East. But I know one thing: no regime stays forever. No regime can stay forever. No empire will stay forever. And a regime that is already in battles for many years, a regime that has been so destabilized that they cannot even agree on anything between them. This is the dying call of a regime. And even if it takes a year, 2 years, maybe even 3, or it takes a month or two, it will fall. And Iranians have been making the prosperity plan for a long time. And it is a good plan. And I doubt that we will let separatists or like separatist corps from Iraq um, or Taliban members from Afghanistan. I doubt that it can conquer the Persian spirit. Well, sorry, the Iranian spirit. And I doubt it can conquer the Israeli spirit as well. We are weaker than ever, but we are stronger than ever. And I think that's the best way I can describe the way I see Israel right now. At the weakest point ever, but at the strongest point ever. And you can take it however you want. Peace out.